The alien princess had spent her entire life surrounded by power, control, and an unshakable sense of superiority over all beings, sentient or otherwise. Her lineage was one of might and mystique, her realm home to creatures that struck fear across galaxies. Among these creatures was a particular beast, a ferocious entity named Xeroxis. Massive in size, with razor-sharp scales that shimmered in dark hues, glowing emerald eyes, and a roar capable of shattering stars, Xeroxis was her ultimate symbol of dominance. It had been tamed, if such a word could ever be used, only by her ancestors, through ancient rites and technologies long forgotten. Xeroxis was not a pet. It was a living, breathing weapon of chaos, confined to her royal chambers as a grim reminder to all who visited of the unyielding power of the throne. Few ever saw it and lived to tell the tale, and none had dared to come close. The princess herself interacted with the creature only from a safe distance, guarded by walls of energy and layers of security measures. It was the apex predator of her world, the deadliest life form she had ever known, and it belonged solely to her family. Or so she believed, until the human came. He arrived as nothing more than a curiosity, a speck of insignificance in the grand tapestry of her empire. He had been brought in chains, captured from the outer territories where Earth was considered a backwater planet. His kind was known to the galaxy, but they were neither revered nor feared. They were considered fragile, short-lived, and unremarkable, a species with no extraordinary traits. Yet, this particular human had caught the attention of her court for reasons that were unclear. He had spoken boldly during his trial, unshaken by the towering, luminescent beings who surrounded him, even as they sentenced him to servitude. He had stared directly at the princess, his eyes filled not with defiance, but with something far more unnerving calm. That calm unnerved her. She dismissed him to the lower chambers, where he was to toil among the other prisoners. Yet, weeks later, she found herself hearing whispers among her staff. Rumors circulated of the human doing peculiar things, communing with creatures, calming them, and even gaining their trust. The rumors reached her ears almost as a joke, but her curiosity was piqued when one of her advisors approached her with a somber expression. "Your Grace," the advisor said, his voice trembling, "there is something you must see." The princess followed him to the observation deck overlooking one of the palace's smaller beast chambers. What she saw made her heart stop. There, within the chamber, stood the human, utterly unarmed, face to face with a creature that could devour him in a single bite. It was one of her lesser beasts, a gargantuan, multi-limbed predator known for its insatiable hunger and uncontrollable rage. Yet the human stood calmly, one hand extended toward the creature. To her astonishment, the beast leaned forward, its glowing eyes narrowing, and nuzzled its head into the human's hand. She refused to believe it. "A trick!" she hissed to her advisor. "It must be some trick." But it wasn't. Over the following days, she ordered the human to be placed in proximity to other creatures, each deadlier than the last. And every time, without fail, he managed to calm them. Beasts that had been untamable for centuries bowed their heads to him as though he were one of their own. He never spoke much during these trials, offering only cryptic explanations about understanding the creatures. It wasn't magic nor technology, at least none her scientists could discern. It was something else, something intangible, and it both fascinated and infuriated her. Then came the moment that changed everything. The princess, driven by equal parts curiosity and skepticism, summoned the human to her private chambers. She wanted to test him herself, to see if the strange power of his was real or an elaborate facade. Standing within her grand hall, with its glowing crystalline walls and cascading energy currents, she commanded her guards to release Xeroxis. The chamber trembled as the beast emerged from its containment field, its roar echoing like thunder. The princess stood behind layers of protective shielding, her regal form radiating confidence, though her pulse quickened. The human, however, showed no fear. He stepped forward, his movements slow and deliberate, until he stood directly in front of the towering beast. Xeroxis snarled, its teeth glinting like daggers, its claws gouging deep grooves into the floor. For a moment, The princess was certain the human would be torn apart. But then, something extraordinary happened. The human knelt. He reached out, his hands steady, and spoke softly. Not in words the princess could understand, but in a cadence that seemed to resonate with the beast. Xeroxis paused, its snarls quieting, its massive head tilted as though studying the human. The tension in the room was palpable. The guards gripped their weapons, ready to intervene at the slightest sign of aggression. But none came. Instead, Xeroxis lowered its massive frame, its glowing eyes softening, and allowed the human to place a hand on its snout. The princess's breath caught in her throat. It was impossible. This was a creature that had obeyed no one, not even her. Yet here it was, submitting to a mere human. She stepped forward, her voice sharp with disbelief. "What trickery is this?" she demanded, her golden armor gleaming under the chamber's light. The human rose slowly, his hand still resting on Xeroxis's snout. He turned to face her, his expression calm but serious. "No trickery, Your Grace. Only understanding." "Understanding?" she scoffed. "You expect me to believe you understand this beast? A creature bred for destruction." "I understand fear," he said simply, "and pain. Beasts like this one, they're not so different from us. They lash out because they feel threatened, because they have been taught to fear. But if you show them kindness, patience, they respond." The princess was speechless. She had spent her life believing in dominance, in the unyielding hierarchy that placed her at the top. Yet here stood a human, a being she had dismissed as insignificant, challenging everything she thought she knew. She stared at him, her luminous eyes narrowing. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why would you do this? What do you gain from it?" The human smiled faintly. "Survival, connection, call it what you will. But I believe even the fiercest beings can find peace if given the chance." His words lingered in her mind long after he was escorted out of the chamber. That night, as she sat alone in her quarters, she replayed the scene over and over. She had always viewed strength as absolute, as something to be imposed and feared. But what if there was another way? What if strength could be found in compassion, in understanding? Over the following weeks, the human became a figure of intrigue within the palace. He was no longer treated as a prisoner but as a guest, albeit a heavily guarded one. The princess often observed him from afar, watching as he interacted with creatures that had once been deemed untamable. He spoke to them, not with commands, but with an unspoken language of trust and respect. And they responded. One evening, she summoned him again, this time not to test him, but to speak. They sat across from each other in her private garden, the air filled with the soft glow of bioluminescent flowers. She studied him closely, her regal demeanor softened by curiosity. "Tell me," she said, her voice quieter than usual, "do you truly believe all creatures can be tamed?" He shook his head. "Not tamed, understood. And not all. Some are too far gone, too consumed by fear or anger. But most, yes, I believe they can be reached." "And what of my people?" she asked, her gaze piercing. "Do you think we can be reached?" The human hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Perhaps, but that depends on you, Your Grace. You're their leader. If you can change, maybe they can too." His words struck a chord within her, a note of hope she had not felt in years. For the first time, she wondered if her empire's strength could be measured not by the fear it instilled, but by the peace it could create. The thought both terrified and exhilarated her. As the days turned into weeks, the princess found herself spending more time with the human. She listened to his stories of Earth, of its struggles and triumphs, its beauty and fragility. And in return, she shared tales of her own world, its history, and its creatures. They were an unlikely pair, a human and an alien princess, bound by a shared curiosity and a growing sense of mutual respect. In time, the princess made a decision that would change the course of her empire. She decreed that the human would serve as her advisor, a bridge between her people and the creatures they had long sought to dominate. Together, they began to explore new ways of coexistence, challenging the old ways and forging a path toward understanding. And though it was a journey fraught with challenges, the princess found herself driven not by fear, but by hope, a hope kindled by the unlikeliest of beings, a human who had tamed not just her deadliest beast, but her own heart.